The infected blood scandal was not an accident, but the result of a series of shocking failures over many years. A scathing report into the biggest treatment disaster in NHS history concluded today. More than 3,000 have died and many continue to suffer after tens of thousands of vulnerable patients were infected with HIV and hepatitis from contaminated blood products during the 1970s and early 1990s. A damning report today identifies a litany of failures covering multiple governments, prominent politicians and health organizations, with victims repeatedly lied to, misled and ignored, and children treated like objects for research. Inquiry Chairman Sir Brian Langstaff's 2,527-page report, which was published this afternoon after decades of brave campaigning from victims and their families, found there had been a pervasive cover-up to hide the truth of what happened. His searing findings will heap further pressure on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt to immediately settle the estimated £10 billion compensation bill for those affected. Sir Brian said that the contaminated blood disaster is still happening because patients who suffered life-shattering infections continue to die every week. He said, "What I have been looking at are people from families across the UK who have gone into hospital for treatment, and over 30,000 have come out with infections which were life-shattering, and 3,000 of those have died, and deaths keep on happening week by week. What I have found is that disaster was no accident. People put their trust in doctors and the government to keep them safe, and that trust was betrayed. Then the government compounded that agony by telling them that nothing wrong had been done, that they'd had the best available treatment, and that as soon as tests were available they were introduced, and both of those statements were untrue. That's why what I'm recommending is that compensation must be paid now, and I have made various other recommendations to help make the future of the NHS better and treatment safer." More than 30,000 people in the UK were infected with HIV and hepatitis C between 1970 and 1991 after being given contaminated products, largely to treat those with the blood clotting disorder hemophilia or who required transfusions following childbirth. But Sir Brian said there was a severe lack of blood screening and a lax attitude to who was donating, despite the fact the government was importing products which had an increased likelihood of being unsafe. He said children were treated as objects for research after being given riskier products made from multiple sources while staying at Trelawney College, a boarding school for the sick. Yet patients were kept in the dark about the knowingly unacceptable risks of infection, while doctors and politicians repeatedly parroted the unfounded claim that the treatment was the best available and was actually saving lives, despite mounting press reports raising concerns. He said doctors gave false assurances to patients and criticized politicians, including the late Prime Minister Lady Margaret Thatcher and her successor John Major, for cruelly repeatedly using inaccurate, misleading and defensive comments about the safety of blood treatment products. And Sir Brian found her Tory government did not address the risks posed by the AIDS virus, while crucial patient records were also destroyed. He empathized with campaigners, who he said were forced into a decades-long battle for the truth, who felt the scandal had been covered up.